Tonight's story is the beginning of one of the most famous journeys ever told. From a cupboard under the stairs to a castle of magic hidden from the world, we'll follow the path of a boy who discovers he is far more extraordinary than anyone ever believed. This is the full story of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, told in long, flowing detail, the way a case file or a bedtime tale might unfold. But remember, this video is designed to help you fall asleep. So as you listen, let yourself relax. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Let the sound of my voice carry the story and allow your thoughts to drift. If other ideas come to you, don't hold them. Let them pass through like clouds moving across the sky. There is nothing you need to do now, except breathe slowly and listen. And if you're still awake for just a moment, take a second to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Now, let's begin where it all began, on a quiet street in an ordinary house where something very extraordinary was about to arrive. There are streets so ordinary, so perfectly plain, that you'd never imagine they could hide a secret. Privet Drive was one of them. Neatly trimmed hedges, identical square houses, shiny cars parked on driveways. It was the kind of place where nothing unusual was supposed to happen. And that's exactly how the people there liked it. At number 4 lived the Dursleys. Vernon Dursley was a large man with a moustache so thick it seemed to cover half his face. He ran a drill company, and he liked his life to be as solid and predictable as the drills he sold. His wife, Petunia, was thin and sharp-eyed, with a neck so long she could peer over fences and through windows, always making sure the neighbours weren't doing anything strange. Together, they had a son, Dudley, round, spoiled and loud, the kind of boy who always got what he wanted and screamed until he did. For the Dursleys, normal was sacred. They worked hard to appear just like everyone else, but they carried a secret, one they never spoke of. Petunia's sister, Harry's mother, had been anything but normal. She had been different. She had belonged to another world, one the Dursleys pretended did not exist. One chilly night, long ago, when Dudley was still a baby, a strange visitor had appeared on Privet Drive, a tall man in flowing robes, his hair and beard silver white, his eyes twinkling behind half-moon glasses. This was Albus Dumbledore. With him came Professor McGonagall, stern and watchful, and Hagrid, a giant of a man, cradling in his arms a small bundle, a baby wrapped in blankets. That baby was left on the Dursleys' doorstep with a letter explaining everything. His parents, James and Lily Potter, had been killed by a dark wizard, Voldemort. The baby had survived, though no one knew how. All that remained was a lightning-shaped scar on his forehead. And so Harry Potter's story began, not with celebration, but with silence. The Dursleys hated it. They hated the reminder of Petunia's sister, hated the strange world Harry had come from. So they did the only thing they could. They locked it away. Harry was shoved into a cupboard beneath the stairs. It was small and dark, filled with spiders that crept along the walls. The door had a little latch on the outside, as though Harry was something to be contained. He had a thin blanket, cracked toys Dudley no longer wanted, and no light except the thin strip that slipped through the bottom of the door. Life in the Dursley household was cruel in ways that left no bruises, but cut deeper all the same. Dudley had 2 bedrooms, one for sleeping and one for toys, while Harry had none. Dudley's birthdays were mountains of gifts, each one torn open and discarded, while Harry got Dudley's cast-offs, sweaters too large, socks too worn. Mealtimes were no better. Harry was handed scraps, the smallest portion, always under the watchful eyes of Petunia, who clucked if he ate too quickly, and Vernon, who grunted if he asked for more. Yet Harry endured. He grew thin but resilient, quiet but not broken. In the dark of the cupboard, he dreamed of parents he could not remember, faces blurred but warm. He dreamed of flying, of magic, though he didn't know what magic was. And sometimes strange things happened around him. A haircut gone wrong would grow back overnight. A jumper Petunia forced over his head would shrink until it strangled him. Once, when Dudley's gang chased him, Harry somehow found himself on the roof of the school, heart pounding, the bullies staring up at him in disbelief. The Dursleys called it trouble. They said he was odd, freakish. They punished him, but Harry couldn't explain it either. He only knew that inside him was something different, something restless, waiting. The year he turned 11, everything began to change. It started with a letter. The envelope was thick, cream-coloured, with emerald green ink spelling out his name. Mr. H. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs, 4 Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. Harry had never received a letter before. The precision of the address, down to the cupboard, sent a chill down his spine. But Vernon snatched it from him before he could open it. His face went purple, eyes bulging as he read. Without a word, he tore it up. The next day, another letter came, and another, each one more persistent, arriving in the dozens. They came through the mail slot, under the door, even stuffed through the cracks in the windows. One morning, when Vernon tried to collect the mail, letters rained down the chimney, filling the living room, fluttering across Dudley's astonished face. Harry reached for one, just one, but Vernon slammed him aside, roaring, tearing them to shreds. He shouted that no one wanted Harry, that there was nothing for him but the life they gave. But Harry knew. Whoever was sending those letters knew exactly who he was. The Dursleys panicked. They fled the house, dragging Harry and Dudley along. They drove to hotels, to shacks, to anywhere they thought they could hide. But the letters followed. They slid under doors, appeared on pillows, tucked themselves into Dudley's box of chocolates. The letters never stopped. On the night of Harry's 11th birthday, the Dursleys took him to a shack on a lonely rock, far out at sea. The wind howled. The waves smashed against the stone. Dudley slept on the couch. Vernon snored in a chair. Petunia tossed fitfully on a mattress. Harry lay awake on the cold floor, counting down the seconds until midnight. His birthday would come, but he didn't expect anyone to care. Then, a boom. The door rattled on its hinges. Dust fell from the ceiling. Another boom, louder, and then the door crashed open. Framed in the storm stood a giant of a man. His shoulders were broad, his beard tangled, his eyes kind but sharp. He stepped inside, ducking under the frame, carrying with him the smell of rain and earth. "Hagrid," he said, introducing himself, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. Harry blinked, still pressed against the floor. Hagrid looked down at him, his expression softening. "Happy birthday, Harry," he said, pulling from his coat a slightly squashed cake. The words "Happy Birthday, Harry" iced across the top in shaky letters. For Harry, it was the first birthday gift he had ever received. The Dursleys woke, shouting. Vernon demanded the giant leave. Petunia hissed about freaks. Dudley whimpered, clutching his blanket. But Hagrid's patience snapped. With a flick of his umbrella, he pointed at Dudley, and suddenly the boy squealed as a curly pig's tail sprouted from his backside. Dudley fled, howling. The room went silent. Harry stared at the giant in awe, and then Hagrid said the words that changed everything. "Harry, you're a wizard." The world tilted. Harry laughed, thinking it was a joke, but Hagrid explained. About Hogwarts, the school of witchcraft and wizardry, about his parents, James and Lily Potter, brave and kind, murdered by Voldemort, about the curse that had rebounded, leaving Harry alive, marked only by the scar on his forehead. Harry's whole life, the cupboard, the cruelty, the whispers of oddness, suddenly made sense. He wasn't just different. He wasn't a freak. He was a wizard. The Dursleys tried to stop him. Vernon bellowed that Harry would never go. Petunia spat out years of bitterness, confessing that she had always hated her sister for being special, for being chosen. But Harry didn't hear them. His heart was pounding. The letters, the dreams, the sense of something waiting. It was real. Hagrid put a massive hand on Harry's shoulder. "You're coming with me," he said gently. "Time you found out who you really are." And so, on the night of his 11th birthday, Harry Potter stepped out of the shack, out of the world he had always known, and into the storm. His life with the Dursleys was over. His life as a wizard had begun. The storm had not relented when Harry left the shack that night, but something inside him had shifted. For the first time in his life, he wasn't running from the wind or cowering under the weight of Vernon Dursley's voice. He was stepping into something new, with Hagrid towering beside him, the sea raging around them. The boat that carried them back to shore creaked against the waves. Dudley whimpered in the distance, still clutching his backside where the curly tail now twitched beneath his pyjamas. Vernon muttered curses under his breath, though not at Hagrid directly. The man was too large, too wild, too undeniably powerful. Vernon had learned that shouting at Harry no longer held the same weight. The boy had been claimed by a world far greater than Number 4, Privet Drive. When dawn broke, the streets of London were grey and slick with rain. Hagrid guided Harry with surprising gentleness through alleys and crowds, shielding him from rushing cars and glaring pedestrians. Harry kept staring up at him, trying to piece it together. This man had burst into his life like a thunderclap, handing him a birthday cake, turning his cousin into a pig, and then telling him he was a wizard. Yet Hagrid's presence was oddly comforting, like a guardian stepping out of a story Harry had always hoped was real. "First things first," Hagrid said, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "We've got to get you some money." Harry blinked. Money? He'd never had more than the few coins Vernon begrudged him for school lunches. Hagrid led him to a building Harry might have walked past 1,000 times without noticing, a towering marble structure at the corner of a busy street. The name was etched in sharp letters above the doors, Gringotts Bank. Inside, the air was cool, echoing with the click of claws against polished stone floors. Behind long counters stood goblins, small creatures with sharp eyes, long fingers, and expressions that suggested they measured the worth of every person who passed them. Hagrid leaned close. "Smart as they come, goblins are. Don't try and trick 'em." One goblin led them deeper into the bank, through hallways that sloped into darkness. They climbed into a small cart on metal tracks, and with a jolt, it shot forward, racing through tunnels lit only by torches. The wind whipped at Harry's hair, his stomach lurching as the cart twisted and dove deeper underground. The ride was wild, terrifying, and exhilarating, nothing like the ordered streets of Little Whinging. At last, the cart screeched to a halt before a massive door. The goblin slid a long finger across the lock, and the door opened with a groan. Inside was a mountain of gold. Piles of coins glimmered in the torchlight. Galleons, sickles, nuts. Harry gasped. "All yours," Hagrid said, smiling as he handed Harry a leather pouch. "Your parents left it for you, enough to see you through school." Harry's chest tightened. His parents. For so long, they had been just shadows in dreams, names whispered with bitterness by the Dursleys. And now, here was proof they had lived, loved him, and left him this. He scooped coins into the pouch, the weight solid in his hands. But that wasn't all. Hagrid leaned toward the goblin and whispered about another vault. "You know what?" he muttered. The goblin nodded, and they hurtled off again, the cart rattling into even deeper tunnels. This vault was small, sealed tight. Inside was only a single package wrapped in brown paper. Hagrid tucked it into his coat with surprising care. "Can't tell you what that is, Harry. Hogwarts business. Dumbledore's orders." Harry didn't press. Something in Hagrid's tone told him the package was dangerous, or important, maybe both. Back on the surface, the morning had grown brighter. Now came the part Hagrid had been waiting for. "Time for Diagon Alley," he said, his eyes twinkling. He tapped his umbrella against a seemingly ordinary brick wall behind a pub called the Leaky Cauldron. The bricks shuddered, shifted, and pulled apart, opening into an archway. Beyond lay a street that seemed alive. Harry stepped through, his breath catching. Shops lined the cobblestone path, their windows bursting with magical wares. Cauldrons stacked high, owls hooting from cages, robes swaying in shop fronts. The air was filled with chatter, the scent of parchment and potions, and the rustle of strange creatures. Harry had never seen anything so dazzling. "This is Diagon Alley," Hagrid announced proudly. They visited shop after shop. At Madame Malkin's, Harry was fitted for robes, standing nervously on a stool as pins floated around him. At Flourish and Blotts, he ran his fingers across shelves of books, some whispering, some glowing faintly, their titles promising knowledge of spells, curses, and magical history. At the apothecary, the sharp tang of herbs and dragon liver made Harry wrinkle his nose. Hagrid insisted on buying Harry a birthday gift. They stopped at the Owl Emporium, and Hagrid picked out a snowy owl with piercing amber eyes. "Name her yourself," Hagrid said. "Smart bird she is." Harry stroked her feathers in awe. He decided to call her Hedwig, but the moment that burned itself into Harry's memory came at Ollivander's. The shop was narrow, dust motes floating in the shafts of light. Shelves rose to the ceiling, stacked with boxes. Each box held a wand, and behind the counter stood Mr. Ollivander, an old man with pale eyes that seemed to look straight into Harry's soul. "Ah, yes," Ollivander whispered. "I wondered when I'd be seeing you, Mr. Potter." He pulled box after box, placing wands into Harry's hand. Each time, something went wrong. A vase shattered, sparks fizzled, air rushed oddly through the room. Harry began to sweat, but Ollivander only grew more excited. Finally, he handed Harry a wand made of holly with a phoenix feather caught. The moment Harry's fingers closed around it, warmth spread through his arm. Sparks of golden light burst from the tip, filling the dusty air with brilliance. Harry's heart raced. Ollivander's pale eyes gleamed. "Curious," he murmured. "Very curious. That wand's brother gave you that scar." Harry blinked. "The wand's brother?" "Yes," Ollivander said softly. "The phoenix that gave this feather gave one other. That wand chose Voldemort." He leaned close, his voice dropping. "The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter. Always remember that." Harry shivered. The scar on his forehead seemed to prickle under Ollivander's gaze. With arms full of books, robes, potions, ingredients, and Hedwig's cage, Harry followed Hagrid back through the archway. He felt heavier, but not just from supplies. For the first time, the weight he carried wasn't just neglect or loneliness. It was purpose. He belonged to a world he had never known, but which had been waiting for him all along. The summer passed quickly, filled with anticipation. The Dursleys glared at his trunk, muttering about nonsense, but they didn't stop him. They couldn't. At last, September arrived. Hagrid guided Harry to King's Cross Station, towering over the crowds. Harry clutched his ticket. platform 9 3/4, but when he looked up, there was no such platform. Only 9, only 10. Panic prickled in his chest. Was it a trick? Had it all been some dream? Then he heard voices, a woman's kind and bustling, followed by the chatter of several children. "All right, Percy, you're first." Harry watched in astonishment as a tall, red-haired boy walked straight toward the barrier between platforms 9 and 10. And then, as if the wall had swallowed him, he was gone. The woman turned to the others. Twins joking, a small girl tugging at her sleeve, another red-haired boy who looked nervous. She noticed Harry staring. "First year, dear. Don't worry. Best to run straight at it. Just don't stop." Harry swallowed. He gripped his trolley, Hedwig blinking calmly from her cage. He ran, faster, faster, bracing for the crash. But the wall melted away, and suddenly he was there, standing on a platform filled with steam and scarlet. Before him stood the Hogwarts Express. The train gleamed, its engine hissing, windows filled with excited faces. Students in black robes hugged their parents goodbye. Owls hooted, trunks rattled, the air vibrated with possibility. Harry climbed aboard. For the first time in his life, he wasn't running from anything. He was running toward it. As the train pulled away, London shrinking behind them, Harry leaned against the window, Hedwig beside him, and felt it deep in his bones. His life was no longer ordinary. The cupboard under the stairs was gone. The boy who lived was going home. Steam hissed around the platform as the Hogwarts Express thundered north. Inside the train, Harry Potter sat pressed against the window, the countryside blurring past. He had never been on a train like this. Never left the grey walls of Privet Drive for a journey that felt so alive, so charged with anticipation. Every mile carried him farther from the cupboard under the stairs, and closer to the world that had been waiting for him since the night his scar was made. The door to his compartment slid open. A boy with a round face and nervous eyes peeked in. "Sorry," he mumbled. "Have you seen a toad? I've lost him." Harry shook his head. "No, sorry." The boy sighed, muttering about how his gran would be furious, and shuffled on. Moments later, 2 identical red-haired twins appeared, grinning. "You're Harry Potter, aren't you?" one of them asked. Before Harry could answer, they launched into questions about his scar, teasing each other as though they'd just stumbled upon a legend sitting quietly with a sandwich. Harry felt heat rise to his cheeks. Being noticed was strange enough. Being recognised was overwhelming. But the twins weren't cruel like Dudley. They laughed with him, not at him. And for once the attention didn't feel like punishment. When they left, another boy arrived. His hair was slick, his robes already perfectly pressed. He introduced himself as Draco Malfoy. His smile was thin, sharp. "You'll find some wizarding families are better than others," he said lightly. "You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort." His pale eyes flicked toward Ron Weasley, who had just sat down with Harry. Something in Draco's tone reminded Harry of Dudley. That smug assurance that the world belonged to him. Harry shook his head firmly. "I think I can tell the wrong sort for myself. Thanks." Draco's smile vanished, his pale cheeks flushing. Without a word, he left. Ron grinned, freckles bright against his skin. "Good on you, mate." From then on, the two were inseparable. As the train rattled deeper into the north, the sky grew darker. At last, the train slowed, the brakes screeching. The students poured onto a small platform lit by lanterns. A booming voice called above the crowd, "First years, this way!" Hagrid towered above them, waving his great arm. He led the group down a winding path toward the black waters of a vast lake. Boats waited along the shore, rocking gently. 4 to a boat, the first years clambered in. Harry shared his with Ron, Neville Longbottom, the boy still muttering about his missing toad, and Hermione Granger, a girl with bushy hair and sharp, curious eyes who immediately began listing spells she had read about in her books. "Forward!" Hagrid shouted, and the boats glided across the dark water, carrying them toward the castle that rose on the far shore. Hogwarts loomed above them, lit by hundreds of windows glowing against the night. Towers spiraled into the clouds, bridges arched across shadowed courtyards, and the walls seemed alive with age and secrets. Harry's breath caught. He had never seen anything so magnificent, so strange, and so welcoming all at once. Inside, the students were herded into the great hall. Candles floated high above the long tables, flames flickering but never dripping wax. The ceiling shimmered with enchantment, reflecting the night sky, dark and endless, filled with stars. Harry's heart pounded. At the front stood a stool. Upon it lay a tattered old hat. It looked ordinary, shabby even, but when the first student was called forward and the hat was placed on his head, it began to speak. The sorting hat. One by one, the new students stepped forward. The hat murmured in their minds, weighing their strengths, their desires, their fears. Gryffindor, it cried for the bold. Hufflepuff, for the loyal. Ravenclaw, for the clever. Slytherin, for the ambitious. When Harry's name was called, the hall fell silent. Whispers rippled through the students. Harry Potter, the boy who lived. He sat on the stool, the hat sliding down over his eyes. A voice filled his head instantly. "Ah, I see. Bravery. Oh yes, plenty of courage. Not a bad mind either. You do well in Slytherin, you know." Harry's chest tightened. Slytherin. The word sounded wrong, dangerous. He thought of Draco Malfoy's smirk, the sneer in his voice. He shook his head. "Not Slytherin." "Oh, but you could be great there," the hat coaxed. "It's all here in your head. Ambition, resourcefulness, the potential to make your mark. Slytherin would help you on the way to greatness." Harry clenched his fists. "Not Slytherin," he whispered fiercely in his mind. The hat sighed. "Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor." The table in red erupted in cheers. Harry pulled the hat off, relief flooding him. He joined Ron, who was also sorted into Gryffindor, along with Hermione and Neville. For the first time in his life, Harry felt like he belonged. The feast that followed was unlike anything he had ever seen. Platters of roasted meats, steaming bowls of potatoes, golden puddings, pies bursting with flavour. The air was rich with scents that made his stomach growl. After years of scraps and Dudley's leftovers, Harry ate until he could eat no more. That night, the Gryffindor first years climbed winding staircases and shifting corridors to reach their dormitory. Portraits whispered as they passed. Staircases swung unexpectedly, and shadows flickered in the candlelight. Finally, they reached a cosy room with four-poster beds draped in scarlet curtains. Harry crawled into bed, Hedwig perched nearby, and for the first time in his life, he fell asleep, feeling safe. But Hogwarts was not only feasts and laughter. Mysteries stirred within its walls. The first weeks passed in a blur of classes. Transfiguration with Professor McGonagall, stern and precise. Charms with Professor Flitwick, his tiny frame bouncing with excitement as he demonstrated spells. Potions with Professor Snape, his voice low and dangerous. His black eyes fixed on Harry with a glare that seemed to pierce him to the bone. Harry struggled at first, bewildered by the moving staircases, the talking portraits, the sheer immensity of the castle. But he also found moments of wonder. In charms, he managed to make a feather hover, Hermione correcting his pronunciation until he got it right. In flying lessons, he soared into the sky on a broomstick, the wind tearing past his face. Madam Hooch blew her whistle in outrage, but Professor McGonagall saw something else. Talent. That afternoon, Harry was invited to join the Gryffindor Quidditch team, the youngest seeker in a century. Ron beamed with pride. Hermione rolled her eyes, though Harry noticed a spark of admiration in her voice when she reminded him not to let it go to his head. Neville tripped and stumbled as often as not, but he never gave up, and Harry admired that. But beneath the surface of lessons and laughter, shadows moved. One night, Harry and Ron took a wrong turn and found themselves on the forbidden third-floor corridor. The door was unlocked. Inside, a trapdoor gleamed faintly in the floorboards, but they didn't notice it for long, because standing guard was a massive three-headed dog. Its 3 sets of jaws snapped in the air, growls rumbling through the room like thunder. The boys slammed the door shut and sprinted away, hearts pounding. When they told Hermione, her eyes widened. That's not just a guard dog, it's guarding something important. Harry couldn't stop thinking about it. The trapdoor, the package Hagrid had taken from Gringotts. Dumbledore's warning on their first night. The corridor was forbidden for a reason. At Hogwarts, Harry had found a family in his friends, a home in Gryffindor, and a purpose on the Quidditch field. But in the shadows, something darker waited, and he had already taken his first step toward it. By now, Hogwarts was beginning to feel like home. The scarlet and gold of the Gryffindor common room, with its crackling fireplace and tall, squishy chairs, gave Harry a warmth he had never known at Privet Drive. The castle itself still twisted and shifted like a living thing. Staircases changing without warning, doors pretending to be walls. But Harry had learned to laugh at its tricks. For the first time in his life, the world seemed full of wonder rather than cruelty. But alongside wonder, shadows were growing. Harry couldn't stop thinking about the night he and Ron had stumbled into the forbidden third-floor corridor. The memory of Fluffy, the 3-headed dog, loomed large in his mind. The way its 3 sets of eyes had gleamed, the thunder of its growls. Something was hidden there under that trapdoor. Something important enough to guard with a monster. Hermione was the first to put it together. Hagrid took a package from Gringotts, remember? He said it was Hogwarts business, and then the very next day, someone tried to break into Gringotts. She looked at Harry and Ron, her eyes bright with certainty. Whatever was in that vault, it's here, under that trapdoor. Ron frowned. But what is it? Why would Dumbledore hide something like that in a school? No one had answers, but the mystery pressed down on them, nagging at the edges of every class, every Quidditch practice, every feast in the Great Hall. Christmas arrived, draping Hogwarts in enchantment. The Great Hall glittered with 12 enormous trees, their branches sparkling with icicles and enchanted lights. Snow drifted gently down from the bewitched ceiling, but never melted on the students' heads. Harry had never celebrated Christmas properly before. The Dursleys had always given him broken toys or Dudley's cast-offs, if anything at all. But that morning, he woke to find a pile of presents at the foot of his bed. Among them was something extraordinary, a cloak of silvery fabric that shimmered like water. When Harry draped it over his shoulders, his body vanished. He gasped, staring at the empty space where his arms should have been. An invisibility cloak. The note pinned to it read, "Use it well." That night, curiosity tugged at him. With the cloak wrapped around him, silent as shadow, Harry crept through the corridors. The castle at night was a different world, darker, more secretive, alive with whispers in the stone. He passed the library, the trophies, the flickering suits of armour, and then, by accident, he stumbled into a long, empty room. At the far end stood a mirror, tall, ornate, its frame carved with strange inscriptions. Harry stepped closer. breath catching in his chest, for staring back at him were not just his own reflection, but two figures standing beside him, a man with untidy hair and glasses, a woman with kind eyes and red hair that gleamed like fire. They looked straight at him, smiling, their hands resting gently on his shoulders. Harry's throat tightened. His parents. He pressed his hands to the mirror, longing to step through, but the glass was solid. He stayed for hours, unable to look away. For once, he wasn't the boy in the cupboard, or the boy with the scar. He was simply a son, staring at the parents he had never known. The next night, he returned, and the night after that. Each time, the mirror gave him what the world never had. Ron came with him once, curious, and when he looked into the mirror, he didn't see Harry's parents. He saw himself, older, taller, captain of the Quidditch team, holding the house cup high. "It shows what we want," Ron whispered. Harry shook his head. "It shows the truth." But then Dumbledore appeared. He moved silently, his robes sweeping across the floor, his eyes kind but watchful. "I see you have discovered the Mirror of Erised," he said softly. Harry stammered an apology, but Dumbledore only smiled. "This mirror shows us not the truth, but our deepest desires. The happiest man alive would look into it and see only himself, exactly as he is." Harry's eyes stung. "I saw my parents," he whispered. Dumbledore placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "That is understandable. But Harry, this mirror gives us neither knowledge nor truth. It does not prepare us for reality. Men have wasted away before it, lost in dreams. Promise me you will not seek it again." Harry nodded, though part of him ached to return. But the mirror disappeared a few days later, as mysteriously as it had arrived. As winter gave way to spring, the mystery of the third-floor corridor grew heavier. Hermione pored over books, searching for answers. Harry and Ron pieced together scraps of information from overheard conversations. The name that kept rising to the surface was Nicholas Flamel. Harry saw it first on a chocolate frog card, Dumbledore's card. Nicholas Flamel was an alchemist, famous for creating the Philosopher's Stone, a legendary object said to grant immortality and turn any metal into gold. The Philosopher's Stone, that had to be it. The thing hidden beneath the trapdoor, the thing Fluffy guarded, the thing Voldemort, though no one dared say his name, would want above all else. And so, the pieces aligned. Hagrid's package from Gringotts, the break-in at the bank, the three-headed dog, the forbidden corridor, all threads leading to the same answer. Harry lay awake at night, the scar on his forehead prickling faintly, as though warning him. Voldemort had been defeated, but not destroyed. If he returned, if he seized the stone, the world would not be safe. He turned to Ron and Hermione, whispering in the dark, "We have to stop him." The decision settled over them like a weight. They were only 11, but they were the only ones who had seen the truth. Hogwarts was filled with magic and laughter, but now every corner seemed edged with danger. Every corridor might hold a secret, and Harry knew, deep in his bones, that his story, the story that had begun in a cupboard under the stairs, was leading him toward the stone. By spring, the castle was alive with warmth. Sunlight spilled across the courtyards, owls circled lazily in blue skies, and laughter rang from students enjoying the rare stretches of free time between exams. But for Harry, Ron and Hermione, the brightness felt fragile, as though a storm pressed just beyond the horizon. They had pieced together the truth. The Philosopher's Stone was hidden in the castle, guarded by enchantments and creatures more dangerous than most students could imagine. And someone working for Voldemort, was trying to steal it. At first, they suspected Snape. His black eyes seemed to follow Harry everywhere, cold and accusing. He had been seen limping after the night of the troll, muttering about hexes and curses. Harry was sure he wanted the stone for Voldemort. But doubt gnawed at them. Hagrid, when pressed, had let slip too much. A dragon egg won in a suspicious game. A drunken boast about Fluffy's weakness. Music. Play a bit of music and he'll go right to sleep, Hagrid had said, before realising what he'd revealed. Harry's stomach sank. If Hagrid had told the wrong person, Fluffy was no longer a barrier. And then came the night when the signs aligned. Harry was sitting in the common room when his scar burned. It wasn't just a dull ache, it was sharp, searing, as though pressed from the inside. He knew what it meant. Danger was near. Voldemort was near. He turned to Ron and Hermione, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. "It's happening tonight. Someone's going after the stone. We have to stop them." Hermione hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. "But what if we're wrong? What if—" Harry cut her off. "If we're right and we do nothing, Voldemort will return." That was enough. The three of them slipped out of the tower, cloaked in silence. The castle corridors eerily empty. Moonlight streaked across the stone floors. Portraits whispered as they passed, but no one stopped them. At the third floor corridor, the door loomed. Inside, Fluffy's three heads were already drooping, lulled by the strains of a harp playing softly in the corner. Harry's heart hammered. Someone had been here. Someone had already begun. They crept past, the dog snoring thunderously, and reached the trapdoor. Together they lifted it, peering into the darkness below. A cold, damp air wafted upward. Harry swallowed hard. "I'll go first." He dropped into the blackness, landing with a muffled thud. Ron and Hermione followed. At first, Harry thought they had fallen into vines, but the vines moved, tightening around their arms, their legs, their throats. Devil's snare. The more they struggled, the tighter it held. Hermione's voice was strangled but determined. "Stop moving! Relax!" Harry froze, forcing his body to go limp. The plant hesitated, then loosened, dropping him to the ground. Ron flailed, but Harry grabbed him, pulling him free. Hermione lit a spell. "Lumus Solem!" And bright light flared, the vines shrivelling back in fear. They stumbled onward, shaken but alive. The next chamber was vast, lit by flapping wings. Hundreds of keys, each glittering silver, darted through the air like frantic insects. A single door stood at the far end, its lock gleaming. Harry's eyes narrowed. One key had a bent wing, as though it had been caught before. The only way through. Brooms leaned against the wall. Harry grabbed one, the familiar rush of air lifting him as he soared upward. The keys dove at him, their wings beating furiously. He swerved, ducked, dived, his hand outstretched. With a final lunge, he closed his fingers around the bent key, its wings slicing his skin. He slammed it into the lock. The door clicked open. They pressed forward into the next chamber. A giant chessboard stretched across the floor, pieces towering over them, carved of stone and metal. The Black Queen turned her head, her stone eyes glowing faintly. Ron stepped forward. His voice was grim. "This is it. We've got to play." They mounted the pieces, becoming knights among pawns. The game began, brutal and merciless. Pieces shattered when struck, exploding into shards. Harry and Hermione fought bravely, but it was Ron who saw the strategy. "We've got to sacrifice," he said finally, his face pale but determined. He turned to Harry. "You're the one who has to go on. Checkmate won't happen without this move." Before Harry could protest, Ron urged his knight forward. The opposing queen struck, slamming him to the ground. Harry shouted, but Hermione pulled him onward, tears in her eyes. Ron lay still, but alive. The next chamber was quiet. A troll lay sprawled on the floor, unconscious, already defeated. Someone had been here before them. The thought chilled Harry's blood. Finally, They entered a small room lined with bottles. Flames roared at both exits, one purple, one black. A riddle lay on the table, explaining which potion would let them move forward and which would kill them. Hermione bent over it, her brow furrowed, muttering to herself. Logic, not magic, was the key. She pointed finally to a tiny bottle. This one. It's small enough for one person only. Harry nodded. Then it's me. Hermione's eyes brimmed. Be careful, Harry. If you're not back in an hour. He forced a smile. I'll be back. The potion burned like ice as it slid down his throat. The black flames licked harmlessly at his skin, and he stepped into the final chamber. It was empty, except for a mirror, the Mirror of Erised. Harry's heart pounded. He approached slowly, his reflection staring back. But then, something else. In the mirror, he saw himself holding the stone. He watched, astonished, as his reflection slipped the red stone into his pocket. And then, wait, real. He reached into his robes. The stone was there. A voice spoke behind him, cold, silken. Well done, Potter. Harry spun. Professor Quirrell stepped from the shadows. His turban gleamed in the dim light, his hands clasped together. But his stammer was gone. His voice was smooth, cruel. I wondered if I'd be meeting you here, Quirrell said softly. You've been meddling, just like your father. Harry's hand tightened around the stone. His scar throbbed. Quirrell stepped closer, his eyes gleaming. He is here, you know, my master. He whispers to me, guides me, and soon, with the stone, he will return. Harry backed away, his heart racing. Voldemort, he whispered. Quirrell's smile widened. Yes, you see, he is so close to life again. All thanks to you, Potter. And then Quirrell unwound his turban. On the back of his head, where hair should have been, was a face, pale, snake-like, its eyes burning scarlet. Voldemort. Harry staggered back, nausea rising in his throat. The voice hissed directly into his mind. Give me the stone. Look at me. Serve me. Together, we will be unstoppable. Harry shook his head, clutching the stone tighter. Quirrell lunged. His hands closed around Harry's arm, and then he screamed. His skin blistered, smoking under Harry's touch. He pulled back, shrieking, his flesh burning, Harry's scar seared with agony. He clamped his hands against Quirrell's face, forcing him back. The screams filled the chamber, echoing against the stone. Harry's vision swam with pain, darkness clawing at the edges of his sight. And then nothing. When Harry woke, he was in the hospital wing. White sheets, sunlight streaming through tall windows. Dumbledore sat beside him, his eyes twinkling with both warmth and sorrow. You've been very brave, Harry, he said softly. Very brave indeed. Harry tried to sit up, but Dumbledore pressed a hand to his shoulder. Rest. You faced something no child should face, and you triumphed. The stone has been destroyed. Nicholas Flamel agrees it is for the best. Harry's throat was dry. Voldemort. Dumbledore's eyes darkened. He is still out there, but weaker than before. He will return, that much is certain. But so will you, and when the time comes, you will be ready. In the days that followed, Harry visited Ron and Hermione, who beamed at him with relief. Gryffindor went on to win the House Cup, thanks to the points awarded for their courage. The Great Hall erupted in cheers, banners shifting from green to scarlet. For once, Harry felt not like an outsider, but like a hero among friends. But when summer came, he boarded the train back to London. The Dursleys waited, grim-faced, on the platform. Harry smiled to himself. For the first time, he didn't dread returning to Privet Drive, because he knew he wasn't just the boy in the cupboard anymore. He was Harry Potter, the boy who had faced Voldemort and lived, and this was only the beginning.